To address co-parenting tips for divorced parents, I've invited Sid Unrau, a family attorney, to help us with this. Sid Unrau is back in the Live on Purpose TV studios today. Welcome, Sid.
Happy to be here.
As an attorney who has done a lot in the area of custody and family law, you and I have talked before about co-parenting, and I think we should dive into some tips for what makes that work well. In another episode, Sid, we talked about having a peaceful joint custody arrangement, and you pointed out that co-parenting happens even in families where there has not been a divorce.
Absolutely. Yeah, I co-parent with my wife, and we're not divorced.
And you're not the same either.
That's right.
You have different ideas, you have different strengths, you have different weaknesses, and that's true of parents who are married to each other, and that's true of parents who are not married to each other. So some of these tips are going to apply no matter what.
Absolutely. One of the first things I like to point out is that we all co-parent. Whether we're single parents or married parents, we co-parent with a lot of other people. We co-parent with teachers. Right. We co-parent with doctors. We co-parent with church organizations. We co-parent with a lot of people who have influence over our children, and some of that influence we really appreciate, and some of it we think, oh, I want to limit this. Yeah. And so it's sort of interesting because we do this, but for some reason when we have the divorce word in there, then we think it's us versus them instead of us with them. And co-parenting is something that we can do with. And that's what I think we should do. And my wife is a teacher, and so she has to deal with parents all the time who don't agree with something that she did, or my wife sometimes doesn't agree with the way the parents handle things.
Right.
And it's interesting because she's had to learn to negotiate and be happy and co-parent with those parents. Now, of course, they don't call it co-parenting, so I realize this is an analogy. In a divorce situation, you really are co-parenting. And what I think that would be a good focus for parents who are focusing on co-parenting, realizing that this is a cooperation, focusing on the children, is to focus on the outcomes. What are successful outcomes that people want and that you want for your own children? And this might seem like a silly question, but a lot of people don't even think about this. I ask a lot of my clients certain questions about what they want as far as outcomes are concerned for their co-parenting. And some people don't think about this, but it's the same for parents. I ask my clients, what do you want for your kids? And they say, to be happy. Okay, I get that. Everyone wants their kids to be happy.
That's the universal answer.
But we also want our kids to be successful. I was with a bunch of psychologists one time. I don't even remember if you were one of them. This was early on in my career. And a psychologist asked us, what is the most important thing in your life? And he had on the board written some things so that we would be sort of focused on what he had written. And he pointed to kids and he said, raising your kids. And almost all of us raised our hands. And he said, that's great, but that's not it. And he pointed to another one, which was get your kids ready to be on their own. In other words, he was trying to point out that our main focus in our lives as far as being parents is concerned, is to get rid of our kids and make them good people. I don't think
work our way out of a job.
Right, work our way out of a job. Now, that might not seem right because, of course, we focus on our kids, but really we're focusing on the outcomes we want our kids to have. I think that's a very important shift. And so sometimes when my clients are asking me about how hard it is to be a co-parent, and what they can do about it legally to make the other person do what they think is right and all those kinds of things, I say, wait a minute, let's focus on what do you want? Do you want your kids to graduate from high school? That seems pretty basic. That's a pretty good thing. Do you want your kids to be out of jail? Or do you want your kids to be in detention all the time? Do you want your kids to have successful marriages themselves once upon a time, or other relationships? Do you want your kids to be successful in their church callings and things like that? If that's what you want, focus on what gets them there instead of what the other party's doing and what they're doing wrong or things like that. And then once you get what you want the outcomes to be, it's way easier to talk to the other side. Hey, we need to make sure homework gets done. We need to make sure that our child is applying to college. This is one thing that just baffles me. Sometimes when people are divorced, and even when they're married, they think, well, the other parent will take care of that. But you've got to have a conversation about it. We have a child right now who's applying for college, and it's just fascinating. My wife and I are coordinating and figuring out all the time what I can do, what she can do, so that we can have our child have the best opportunity to be successful in applying for college, getting scholarships, those kinds of things. That takes coordination when you're living together and married. When you're further apart, it takes even more coordination. So
Yes.
focusing on the outcome, having some kind of meeting of the minds, that is a perfect thing to do. And again, if your child is starting to get in trouble, things like that, then it's really awesome if both parents are focused on how do we get our child not in trouble, instead of one parent, and I see this all the time, one parent, oh, you're just being too harsh. No wonder our child's in trouble, because you're just being too harsh. And
the blame
one,
game.
And you're being the soft landing where no matter what the child does, it's okay. Let's see if we can focus on, we want the child to not be acting up in school. And why is the child acting up in school? Maybe the child's acting up in school because the parents are fighting all the time. And all the child is seeing is, well, this is how I get along in life. I just fight and I just rebel. And when I don't like something, I rebel. But if the parents are like, hey, kid, we're going to focus on you. You need to cut this out, and both of them.
I love the ideas. And it seems that at the core of everything that you've shared so far is shifting the focus. So we're getting it out of the fighting divorce mentality back into the parenting mentality, which is not even about you.
Exactly.
It's about your kids.
Yes.
Give up the fight long enough to do the right thing.
Exactly. That is perfect. And it's a perfect segue to my next point, which is think about the future. You're going to be parents of these kids forever. One of the saddest experiences I've had, and I've shared this in other videos that we've done, is that I was the photographer at a wedding one time where the bride's father could not be in the same picture as the bride's mother because they had been divorced years before, and they'd had a horrible divorce and they had just been at war the entire time. These are people who had just been in the same church building together for the marriage, for that few moments of the marriage, but in the pictures afterwards, they did not want to have that memory of them together.
Oh, how tragic. It's not about them.
Right. But we're going to have graduations, we're going to have babies, grandchildren, we're going to have marriages, we're going to have reunions, things like that. Wouldn't it be horrible if the child has to focus on which parent can I invite to this thing and which parent can I invite to that thing, or which side of the family can come and all that? How sad. So co-parenting a lot has to do with thinking about what patterns do we want to establish now so that in the future we aren't going to have this kind of division. And that's just a beautiful, and if you think about it now, when the kids are young, right after you're divorced, or the youngest they're going to be, because some people don't divorce, of course, until the kids are older, but the sooner you get into good habits of thinking of the outcomes that you want and thinking of the future and how you want your children to be comfortable with all sides of the family and with both of you, the better things are going to be.
You know what? As a psychologist, I'm seeing a hidden benefit here. We're talking obviously about co-parenting, doing the right thing for our kids. This makes your life better too.
Oh, yes.
What if you could let go of
Much
some of
easier.
those grievances and show up joyfully to the family event, regardless of who's there?
Exactly.
And you might have a barrier in your mind right now saying, but I can't be with that person.
Or in the same room with that person.
How limiting is that to your life? What if you could get past that in your own psyche so that your life now is better and you're able to show up more joyfully for your kids?
That would be awesome. The last point I want to make in this probably, it's also the first point, but I'm bringing it up last, and that is you've got to support each other. It would be horrible if my child...
As parents, you mean.
Parents. And this, of course, as divorced parents, it's even more important, but even as married parents, I remember the first time one of my kids came to me and said, hey, Dad, can I do blah, blah, blah? And I was thinking... And my first thought was, I wonder what Mom would think about that. And I said,
good thinking,
did you ask
Sid.
your mom? And he said, do I have to? And I said, yeah.
Maybe he already did.
Yeah, maybe he already did. I'm
Sometimes.
not sure. But the point is, if you're always giving different answers without consulting, I mean, sometimes things are truly trivial, and that's okay. You don't have to give different answers about everything. But people find things to fight about. I don't know, I didn't anticipate this when I was a younger attorney, But someone comes home from visitation and all of a sudden the children's hairs are all cut and they're different. I remember one of my female clients came to me and her son had gotten a mohawk when he was with dad. And she just could not believe that. And I'm like, is that really something to fight about? Oh, well, I'm the custodial parent, so I should. Well, it would have been nice if dad had consulted mom.
Can
and
we
said,
uncut the child's hair?
Yeah, we can't do anything about it now. But we can in the future. We can talk about these kinds of things and we can decide. Some things are trivial, like kids are going to go through different phases about what color they want their hair or what style they want their hair, whether they're going to have earrings or nose rings or whatever, or henna tattoos. I only recommend henna tattoos. But anyway, we have to realize that there's different categories, things that are super important to worry about and things that aren't super important to worry about. But the things that are really important, it's important to support each other. And so the child isn't getting two completely different ideas. Now, it's okay to have different ideas and to, for example, which college should I go to? What should I major in? Things like that. Parents can have completely different ideas based on their understanding of the child. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about more things like, what about how do you give consequences? Are the consequences even in one house and another house? When children are young, do we use timeout? Do we use, you can't have time online for a while or something like that. It's important for parents to have similar consequences so that the child can't get away with something at one house and not get away with it at the other house or take advantage of that, so that the parents are supporting each other. And for example, this comes up all the time. If a child has done something and in one household that means, okay, you can't be online playing your games for 2 days, and then they go home to mom, and then mom doesn't know that or doesn't care, then the child knows, it's just pretty words. I can go home to mom and I can play my game all I want. And so, but if you coordinate those kinds of things so that the child knows, okay, I did something that's a violation of the house rules, even if the house rules in one house are different than the other household. I mean, sometimes chores are different in different households, and one parent thinks, well, I don't care if the kid did the dishes at your house. There's no skin off my nose. But the point is disobedience, or consequences are consequences. And sometimes it's not a disobedience thing. It's like, did you get your homework done? You can't do this thing until you get your homework done. Things like that. So it's important to coordinate and support each other in your co-parenting. I found that in my own marriage. Awesome. As soon as I'm glad I gave that example in the beginning, but my kids always know if they ask me something, I always say, what does your mom say about it? Or I
they
just
know
ask
you're
her
going to
if she's-
support mom.
Yeah, exactly.
That's
a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
And that way it strengthens my relationship with her. And in a divorce situation, it can also strengthen the cooperation that you have instead of the focus on what the other person's doing wrong.
Right. There are so many things to think about, and we know this here at Live on Purpose TV. That's why we bring daily videos. If you haven't subscribed yet, would you please take a moment to do that and share these videos with someone that you think would appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow with another episode.